This video introduces sections of the two-volume set, a companion to Nō and Kyōgen Theatre, which was written and edited over the period of a decade beginning in 2014. When the Nō Research Institute was designated as an international and interdisciplinary research center for Nō in 2013, it aimed first and foremost to establish an international standard for research on Nō and Kyōgen Theatre. We planned the publication of the two-volume set with four major goals. 1. To establish definitive English translations for the unique concepts and specialized terminology of Nō and Kyōgen. 2. To disseminate the latest research findings internationally. 3. To open up Japanese research, previously confined within Japan, to the world. And 4. To position this research firmly within the field of global theater studies. This book is not a translation of previously published Japanese books or articles. It was written in English from the outset and published by an international publishing house. For each theme, we formed pairs or groups of Japanese and non-Japanese researchers who undertook extensive discussion. It includes new insights never before published in Japan and fresh perspectives that are a unique product of this international collaboration. To commemorate the set publication, we held an international symposium on October 11 and 12, 2025. During the symposium, we discussed educational applications of the volumes as well as possibilities for future research. We also exchanged diverse opinions on themes not covered in the two volumes and issues that were not sufficiently explored. This video includes elements of these discussions. Needless to say, given the limited time available, this video is only a very brief introduction. We hope, however, that it will encourage you to open up either of the volumes to any of the chapters that interest you.
Our Chapter 4, Plays, offers an overview of the conventions and characteristics of no play texts, along with their cultural and religious contexts. In my presentation at the symposium, I discussed the chapter's significance from the perspective of how No has been received in the English-speaking world, particularly in the United States. More specifically, I reflected on the challenges that this chapter seeks to address in the Western reception of No and how it attempts to overcome them. To see how these ideas work in practice, I asked Professor Elizabeth Oyler from the University of Pittsburgh to share a short video message about how she uses this chapter in her classes, which I encourage you to watch. At many American universities, No is introduced not only in courses on Japanese literature, culture, and theater, but also in broader classes such as Asian civilizations or world drama. However, the instructors of such courses are often not specialists in No, or even in Japanese performing arts. Outside academia, as well, scholars and artists from various disciplines have shown growing interest in learning about No. Yet, the English materials that are easily available are often not sufficient. While there are many excellent academic monographs written by No specialists, these are too detailed or complex for undergraduate students. Meanwhile, English translations of No plays, such as those by Shelley, QUINN, Brazel, and Tyler, usually include a short introduction to Nō's history, background, and intertextuality. Although these introductions are insightful, they are necessarily brief and tend to focus mainly on familiar patterns such as mugen no structure or themes of religious salvation. As a result, many readers are left with an overly simplified image of Nō, without recognizing the diversity and complexity that make it such a rich and fascinating art form. Therefore, when writing and editing this chapter, we pursued two main goals. First, to present both patterns and diversity. And second, to convey textual complexities that are often lost in translation. Let's take the religious aspects of Nō as an example. It's common to meet someone who is interested in Nō, but holds a simplistic view of its spirituality. For instance, that Nō embodies the Zen teaching, or that it is all about the salvation of the dead. In reality, however, Nō incorporates a wide variety of religious elements that sometimes seem to contradict to one another, but coexist within a single play. The essay Nō and Its Belief System by Professors Hare and Takahashi captures this richness beautifully. I believe it will serve as an important reference for future discussions on the religious dimensions of Nō. Another aim of this chapter was to highlight textual aspects that short introductions can barely touch upon, let alone illustrate with examples, such as the ambiguity of voice, the complex use of poetic rhetoric, the layered incorporation of classical quotations, and how these references reflect medieval interpretations or political allegory. These features are central to Nō's artistry, yet they are nearly impossible to grasp through translation, even with extensive footnotes. I believe this chapter successfully communicates these subtleties to general English readers through carefully chosen examples. Now that the book is complete, I would like to suggest one idea to further enhance its usability. If resources allow, I hope to create a supplementary website that collects online video materials in the future. Although many Nō performances can be found on YouTube, it is still difficult for non-specialists to locate suitable examples for teaching. A curated site with accessible clips would greatly assist educators and scholars in using this book in their classrooms. In sum, this project planted a seed for expanding the foundation of Nō studies in the English-speaking world. Looking ahead, I would like to continue working closely with Nō scholars, educators, and artists abroad to develop richer resources and deeper understanding of this fascinating art form. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Oyler, and I teach classical Japanese literature, culture, and theater at the University of Pittsburgh, usually to undergraduates and almost exclusively in English. So I've been asked to comment from that perspective on a wonderful new resource, a companion to Nō and Kyōgen Theatre, and particularly Chapter 4, Plays, Their Conventions and Backgrounds, and talk a little bit about the ways I'm integrating it into my classes. Now, the companion as a resource opens a new world of possibilities to those of us who are teaching almost exclusively in English about Nō. It's comprised of chapters, which are broken down into sections, which are readable lengths for undergraduates in the American classroom, at least. And the wide variety of essays that are included in each section and each chapter allows us to give students a much more nuanced understanding of No's complexity and its embeddedness in Japanese literary and cultural traditions than we were able to do before. It also allows us to look at plays on a granular level and see how meaning is generated within them and across them. And finally, it's a wonderful opportunity to introduce students to up-to-date work by major scholars of No who work in Japanese and whose work generally isn't accessible to our English-speaking students. Professor Takeuchi talks about Chapter 4 as being a study in patterns and variation, and I see that happening both within sections and then across the chapter as a whole. So I'd like to talk about that first, because this is how I go about teaching the work in my class. So for example, Chapter 4, Section 5, Reading No by Professor Yamanaka is a sustained study on Mugen No and Monogurui No and Genzai No more broadly. She opens the section with a discussion of Mugen No through a sustained reading, and it's a really beautiful reading of the play Izutsu, but she places it in conversation with other of Zeami's plays, including Atsumori, Tadanori, and Takasago, so that by the end of that part of the section, students have a pretty clear idea about what a Zeami play looks like and what Zeami's style might be. She then introduces Monogurui No, not specifically in juxtaposition, but through elements that it shares with Mugen No. So, for example, the final dance, and only then introduces the features that are more specific to Monogurui No, like the trajectory, the narrative trajectory that gets us to that dance. So we see shared elements, things that keep Mugen and Monogurui No tied together, but also the ways that they differ as kind of general categories of No. Now, across the chapter, we see similar resonances, and those are exemplified by specific plays. So, for example, the play Takasago, which is, of course, a classic, appears in at least 6 different sections in Chapter 4, in topics ranging from sources of No, which is general and contextual, but also in sections about compression and expansion of time, or fusion of different voices and narration, which really allow us to look very carefully at specific word choices and pacing within a given No. So by the time a student reads through all of the chapter, and is exposed to Takasago from these many different perspectives, they have a much fuller, richer, and deeper understanding of how the play means and what its significance is within the larger repertoire. This is true of Takasago. It's true of Atsumori, a play I teach fairly frequently, and several other plays that appear time and again throughout the chapter. So we do get a very clear sense of what is shared and how there are variations within that shared general identity of No. Now, in the classroom, I've already started to integrate the companion into a class I'm teaching currently called Japanese Tales of the Supernatural, in which I have very little time, only about 3 hours total, to speak about No. In this class, we look at Atsumori and Dojoji, and this semester I assign students the introduction categories of No plays, which are good fundamental knowledge for them, but also No and its belief systems, which helps us think about these 2 No in particular in relation to other elements of the supernatural in Japanese culture that we're studying. Next semester, I'll be teaching Introduction to Japanese Literature, which allows me about twice as much time to teach No. And for this class, I'll be adding sections 6 and 7, which, because of their particular focuses, time, character relations, stylistics, and poetics are natural fits for thinking about No in the context of the literature that came before it, particularly many of the Heian antecedents that are alluded to in No plays. In that class, we'll be reading Tadanori, Izutsu, and Sumidagawa. Now, I hope in the near future to have a chance to teach a seminar on theater or No specifically, in which I would certainly assign all of Chapter 4 and also selections from a number of other chapters in the companion, because really the scope and breadth of the companion makes it a very good foundation for beginning the journey that students take to learn about No. And I'm very grateful that the resources available to us now, and I look forward to using it for many years to come. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Shelley Fenno QUINN. I'm an Academy Professor at Ohio State University and the co-editor of Section 6 of the Companion on the topic of No, Treatises, and Criticism, or No Gakuron. Along with myself, one other of our 6 contributing authors to Section 6 presented at the Companion Symposium this past October, Professor Takahashi Yusuke of Keio University. Today, I would like to make a few remarks about my report and then to introduce key points in Professor Takahashi's report. Moving on to my remarks, I briefly introduced the content of this Section 6 on No theory and criticism at the symposium, and I would like to do so here too, if I may. The tradition of composing critical writings about No in its many aspects is as old as the art itself. The 6 essays comprising Section 6 span the 15th century to modern times, and these No Gakuron offer us an unbroken record of discourses on the art that not only help us reconstruct what the history and artistic practices of No might have been, but provide us with insights into what centuries of performers and audiences have passed down as important about the art. It's amazing that this continuous written and with oral elements tradition of No Gakuron exists. It offers the opportunity to explore continuity and change in No and its cultural context over a vast period of time. And for those of us that love to hear what artists and audiences have to say about their artistic viewpoints and practices, it can be fascinating. The material in Section 6 bears witness to the diversity of the various writings that exist under the No Gakuron rubric, as well as their target audiences. It should appeal to readers with interests in many areas: drama, history, aesthetics, philosophy, pedagogy, dance, music, to name a few. Those readers interested primarily in performance theory and pedagogy, dramaturgy and aesthetic theory, will hopefully find the 2 essays in the section on Zeami Moto-kyo, the groundbreaking actor, playwright, and theorist of the 14th to the 15th centuries, informative. My co-editor of the section, Professor Tamamura Kyo of Joetsu University of Education, has contributed an interpretive essay on a key element in Zeami's philosophy of the stage, hana, or the flower. I have contributed an overview piece on Zeami's critical corpus that concentrates on 3 of his most important treatises as a means of focusing on developments in his thinking over time. I might add that the many people around the world who are conversant already with Zeami's aesthetic theories should find the companion an excellent resource at their fingertips for looking into further context about things related to Zeami. The next 2 essays in the section should also be of interest to this same group of readers. There's Professor Takahashi Yusuke's essay on the actor, playwright, and theorist Komparu Zenshiku, and I will represent Professor Takahashi's insights in the latter half of this recording. I should say that readers with interest in religious studies should also check out this essay, I think. The ensuing essay by Professor Ikai Takamitsu of Hosei University introduces the treatises of another groundbreaking performer, playwright, and theorist, Komparu Zenpo, in the late 15th century. His No Gakuron reflect both his aesthetic tastes and larger trends in No of the late 15th century, such as the growth of a body of amateur learners of singing, dance, and instruments. It is of considerable historical interest, I think. The final two essays address broadly how No Gakuron evolved in subsequent historical periods. The Nogami No Theater Research Institute director, Professor Miyamoto Keizo's essay, entitled No Treatises from the Late Muromachi to Edo Periods, depicts the changing patterns of authorship, reception, and transmission of critical treatises, with attention to the involvement of powerful members of the warrior, that is, buke class, such as Tokugawa Ieyasu, in the patronage of No performers and the acquisition of treatises. Also mentioned is the trend among amateur learners of No to take a participatory role in composing treatises. Miyamoto further points out that by the end of the Edo period, the purpose of composing treatises had shifted to, quote, manuals introducing practical skills and techniques, such as the notation of dance and movement, katatsuke, as they're called. In the section's final essay entitled Modern Theories of No, Professor Yokoyama Taro characterizes larger trends and changes of modern times, such as the impact of the publishing industry and corresponding growth of a body of general readers, both in and outside of Japan, and the popularity of the genre known as geidan, literally art conversations, where master performers reflect often in interview format on their artistry and their art. He also discusses the efforts of No performers and critics to frame the art of No by contrasting it with rival performing arts such as kabuki, and he provides an overview of scholarly theories on No as of the early 19th century. I'd like to mention that in section 6, a significant amount of information about No Gakuron becomes available in English for the first time. One salient example would be Professor Miyamoto's essay with its vivid depictions of No Gakuron authors and their activities during the Momoyama and Edo periods, the essay on modern theories, and also those on Zenchiku and Zenpo's writings introduce information on No Gakuron texts that have yet to be translated. All of these materials will offer English readerships a peephole into a topic that is really, I think, understudied in English scholarship